When you think of Nazi Germany, one name always comes to mind: Adolf Hitler. But he didn't do it alone, not by a long shot. Today, we're going to get inside the mind of one of the real architects of the Holocaust, the head of the SS, a man named Heinrich Himmler. He was the guy who took a hateful ideology and turned it into a literal industry of death. So, let's dive in.
Wow. Just listen to that. Cruelty commands respect. That one line tells you everything you need to know about his philosophy, doesn't it? He wasn't trying to win hearts and minds. No, no. For Himmler, it was all about one thing: absolute control. And how do you get that? Through pure, calculated fear. This is the bedrock of everything he would go on to build. So, how does a person become a monster like that? We've got to trace the path. We'll start from his kind of shaky beginnings, then see how he built the SS into this fanatical force. We'll look at how he literally designed the Nazi terror machine, orchestrated the Holocaust, and then, well, we'll see how the whole thing just fell apart at the end.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. And the thing is, our story doesn't kick off with some powerful, imposing figure. Nope, it starts with a pretty awkward, sickly kid. A boy who was basically the exact opposite of the strong, glorious ideal he would later force on an entire nation.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. Look at the difference here. The Nazi ideal, all about physical strength, military glory. The reality of young Himmler, he was sick all the time. I mean, he missed 150 days of school one year. He was too young to be a hero in World War I, and honestly, he was just awkward. You have to wonder, right? How much of his later fanaticism was just a desperate attempt to overcome all that insecurity? So the big question is, how does a kid from a normal, conservative family end up joining a radical group like the Nazis? Well, he was born in Munich, kept these incredibly detailed diaries about everything going on. After missing the war, he studied agriculture, but he got swept up in the crazy politics of the time. His antisemitism really started to fester, and he began to see Jewish people as the other. From there, it was a pretty straight line to joining the Nazi Party in 23. Okay, so inside this wild, chaotic Nazi movement, Himmler finally finds his place. He wasn't a great public speaker, not like some of the others, but what he was an obsessive organizer. And he would use that very specific, almost bureaucratic skill to create the single most feared group in all of Nazi Germany. And man, did he climb the ladder fast. Check this out. In 1925, he joins the SS, which at the time was just Hitler's little bodyguard crew. By 1929, just 4 years later, he's the boss of the whole thing. Hitler saw something in him, this insane loyalty, and more importantly, that talent for organization. He was the perfect guy for the job of building this elite force from scratch. And this is so important to understand. Under Himmler, the SS became way more than just bodyguards. It was his personal project. He saw it as a new kind of nobility for the Nazi state, built on two things: absolute loyalty to Hitler and this twisted idea of racial purity. I mean, to get in, you had to prove your Aryan bloodline, and he even had to approve who his men married based on their racial background. It was a total cult, built in his own fanatical image. So the Nazis take power in 1933, and Himmler, he doesn't wait a second. He immediately gets to work, using his new power to build the system, the bureaucratic machine, that would be used to lock people up, terrorize them, and, yeah, eventually murder millions. And look how he did it. It was step by step, just chillingly methodical. Step 1, build a place for your enemies. That was Dachau, the first concentration camp. Step 2, control the police. He takes over the Gestapo. Step 3, get rid of your rivals. He orchestrates the Night of the Long Knives to wipe out the SA leadership. And step 4, make your hate the law. That's the Nuremberg laws. It wasn't chaos. It was a cold, calculated takeover. And he was totally open about it. He knew people were sick to their stomach when they saw those black uniforms. He basically says here, good. If you're afraid of us, you must have something to hide. He turned fear into a weapon. Being scared of the SS didn't just mean you were scared, it meant you were guilty. Simple as that. This brings us to the darkest part of the story, Himmler's ultimate role. He now has this massive machine of terror completely under his control, and he points it all toward one final, horrific goal: carrying out the Nazis' plan for the total annihilation of Europe's Jewish population. And to really grasp how insane this was, you have to look at the numbers.
In 1933, Jewish people made up less than 1% of Germany's population. Less than 1%. A tiny, tiny minority. And yet, they were the ones blamed for everything wrong with the country.
And the result? Just look at this number. This is from one single operation that Himmler ran called Operation Reinhardt. Almost 2 million people murdered. It's a number that's so big your brain can barely process it. This wasn't war. This was an industry. This was the final solution he had been building toward.
So you have to ask, right? How could any person do this? This quote, it's the answer, and it's absolutely terrifying. To him, it was like delousing, getting rid of lice. He didn't see people, he saw pests. In his twisted mind, genocide wasn't about ideology, it was just cleaning. You absolutely have to have that level of dehumanization to kill on this kind of scale.
And he brought all his organizational genius to the task. It was horrifyingly systematic. He had mobile killing squads called Einsatzgruppen. He developed gas vans to make killing easier. Then came the full-scale extermination camps like Auschwitz, built like factories. And on top of all that, he gave SS doctors the green light for these nightmarish medical experiments. Every single part of it was planned for maximum efficiency.
But, of course, the tide of the war started to turn. And as Germany began to lose, the man who built this entire empire of death, well, he started to see his own world crumble around him. The ultimate control freak was about to lose all control.
And here's a bit of irony for you. Remember that kid who was desperate for military glory? Late in the war, he finally got his wish. He was put in charge of armies. And guess what? He was an absolute disaster, a total failure. His command led to massive losses, and it completely destroyed what was left of Hitler's faith in him. Turns out the master bureaucrat was a terrible general.
So in the final days, the man who preached loyalty above all else showed he had none. He literally told Hitler he was loyal to his face, and then the very next day, he started trying to cut a secret deal with the Allies to save himself. When the news got out, Hitler was furious. Himmler went on the run but was caught by the British. And his end? It wasn't some grand, glorious death. He killed himself with a cyanide pill in a holding cell, the ultimate coward's way out.
Which leaves us with the question that really matters, the one that's so hard to answer. How does an ordinary person become a monster? Himmler wasn't some demon from a storybook. He was a sickly, insecure kid from a normal family. We've walked through the steps, but the core question is still there. How does a regular human being, filled with all too human feelings like insecurity and ambition, become capable of doing something so completely and unimaginably evil?